Welcome to my new YouTube channel. I'm not a rookie. I do have other channels. They're dedicated to cars and car audio installations and products. So I'm a technology guy, and I like to think I'm somewhat intelligent. This channel, though, I want to dedicate to thought, free thinking. I want to talk about philosophy and science and culture, and maybe in some music and emotion and things like that. And so thank you for joining me. And I want to start off by saying there's a lot of videos out there on YouTube that I watch that have inspired me. They really do. And I overthink things. I think too much. I always have a hard time. The beauty of the thoughts in my head, I have a hard time getting out verbally and communicating in the same manner that I think them. And guys I look up to are Neil deGrasse Tyson, Lawrence Krauss, and Michio Kaku, and a lot of these guys that say things that I've thought of my whole life, but they put them in such a profound way that they choke me up a little bit. And I know I can't be like them, but I do want to share some of my thoughts at least. And I wonder if anyone out there is like me, where I have a hard time shutting off my thoughts. Sometimes I overthink, and sometimes I cannot sleep at night. And in fact, I would skip a night or two of sleep to try and be more tired to get to sleep the next night, because I just lay in bed until the sun comes up just thinking. Sometimes about what I had to get done or what I wanted to get done, or fantasies like flying around like Superman. But then maybe I'm addicted to thought, because once I would come to a conclusion of an idea, I would then pick up an article or watch an educational video and start the process all over again. But it's not really a curse, because I've come to some very awe-inspiring, some very enlightening thoughts, and have had a lot of ideas that have turned out to be very good ideas from just thinking, laying in bed or whatever. And the most profound thought I have is pretty much our history through time, and I want to share that a little bit because it's very remarkable. It makes me feel so special, and I just want to say one reason why I'm telling this is up until last year, you know, I grew up in Catholic school, but we at least learned about evolution and astronomy and things like that, and so it was pretty good. And plus, maybe I'm a little bit of a poster child, but watching PBS and Nova, and now with all the shows on YouTube and stuff, and all the educational things, I've learned a lot from that. I think if you're the type to pay attention to that, you can pick up a lot of useful knowledge and a lot of insight into things. But up until last year, I did not know there were people out there that did not accept evolution, and you know, things with astrophysics and astronomy. They didn't accept that the Earth was, you know, 4 billion years old. People think the Earth is 6,000 years old, and this was such a shock to me that people thought this. Like, because just the idea of evolution and stellar evolution and the expansion of the universe and things like this are just so much common sense to me, and so logical. And besides, we have mountains and mountains of evidence and conclusive data that shows that this is the most likely thing that occurred. It just astounds me that people would go against that just because they don't like it, you know. And one thing I've learned about evolution is that a lot of people that don't accept it because, well, most of them don't know why. They just think, oh, well, it's not in this book, so I'm not going to pay attention to it, or we're being taught that by our parents, you know. But then there are people out there, I've learned, that don't accept it because they feel it doesn't make them special. They feel they were created in a divine manner in the image of a divine being, and to be connected to the animals, to come from apes, belittles them or lowers them in some fashion. maybe there's a bit of ignorance or misunderstanding, and that's a surface thought, and they're not willing to get deeper into it to really know how special the truth makes us. It makes us even more special than any of those stories, and I'll tell you why. Well, one thought to me is that if we were created in a divine manner, in the divine image, and we are not part of the animal kingdom, just like other apes and monkeys and things like that, it makes me feel more like a visitor. The earth, we have this world here, and we're placed here as visitors from out of town, and we don't really belong. But knowing the truth, going by the mountains of evidence from fossils and DNA and things like that, connects us to not only to the animal kingdom, because we know from biology, from evolution, that we are family members to every animal we see, and even further back to even the plants that we see. And we're part of the family, so now I feel welcomed. I feel a part of life on Earth. That makes me feel more special. And then we go back further chemically and find out that we are chemically connected to the Earth, to materials we find in soil and the air and water and things like this. So now, instead of feeling that disconnect, I feel connected and one and whole with the Earth and everything on it. And then we go further back and trace the atoms that make up our bodies, not only to each other, not only to the Earth, but to our sun and other stars, and further back into every single atom in the universe came from a point that was common. That's why I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's so poetic with this thought. And that makes me feel so large and connected to the whole entire universe. Do you know how special we are? See, and some people have a hard time understanding that the Big Bang was not a bang where everything came from nothing. There was something before that. E equals mc squared means matter and energy are connected. So energy's not really, there's no size, so we can't say a small ball of energy. We could just say there was a ball of energy. And now we're finding some data that points to the idea of a multiverse, which I gotta say makes a lot of sense. And this ball of energy was triggered, and that we don't understand what would have triggered it yet. But we know the laws of physics almost demand that it would have happened, and it expanded rapidly. And what happens when things expand is they cool down, and this almost infinite is it had to be a certain temperature, but we say infinite because we don't know exactly, and it's just a very large number. So this almost infinitely hot ball of energy expanded, and as it did that, it cooled down. As energy cools, the particles of energy start condensing into matter, and there would be a period where they'd be going back and forth, but eventually they would turn into the subatomic particles we know of from the early universe. And this was basically the building blocks of matter. And then as it expanded more and more, and these subatomic particles collided into each other, they would start forming material like atoms. They would form an atom of hydrogen, the most simplest atom there is in the universe, the next being hydrogen. And these subatomic particles, it was very simple to make these. So energy was able to form hydrogen and helium, and maybe a couple other simple atoms, but that's all we needed, because then after a while gravity would take over and pull a lot of these hydrogen atoms together. And as it did that, it would heat up. Remember, expansion cools. As we compress, we heat things up. So as they heated up, the more and more atoms would pile on over time. Eventually, there was so much pressure, it would fuse atoms together, and they would blow off some energy, some particles, and form the next heavier atom, helium, and nitrogen and oxygen and so on and so forth. And this was nuclear fusion creating a star, and the stars ignited, light came out in the universe, and these first stars were probably very heavy and didn't live very long. And what would happen is after a while they would, these atoms being turned into other atoms, once they got to iron past carbon into iron, would no longer be able to be fused, and so the energy pushing this out would cease, and then gravity would crush it back, and there'd be a shock wave blowing all these atoms out into the universe. And this would happen for generations, over a couple billion years, until we got to mid-sized stars like ours. But stars blowing out leftover hydrogen and helium, as well as all the other atoms, would then collide with hydrogen gas clouds, compressing them and forming a next generation of star. And this happened to us, where there was a star that blew up over 4 billion years ago. I call this Charlotte's star because it's our true mother, and like Charlotte's Web. And so our sun is more of our stepmother, as Michio Kaku said. And this star, which was much more massive than our sun, blew up. The shock wave spread its guts, all these atoms. In the shock wave is a great compression wave that forms all the heavier elements like gold and silver, nickel, all the heavy metals and precious metals that we know of, and it forced these clouds of gas together to then form our sun, and the remaining debris field formed our planets. And on one of those planets, these atoms that came from that star then on our planet formed all the different elements that eventually these chemicals came together in such a way where they formed amino acids and other kind of biological chemicals that started self-reproducing. And over time, these adapted to the environment. As the environment changed, life survives. Life will find a way, and the way to survive need adaptations to that environment, that it would turn into another type of organism over millions and billions of years. And eventually this got to the point where there was an animal that its best way to survive was using its intelligence. So it thrived off its intelligence, breeding intelligence, and got more and more intelligent as generations went on, because the higher intelligence meant greater chance of survival. Until now, maybe we're not growing intelligence. But anyway, this was us, people. This, starting 14 billion years ago, this rapid expansion, we were energy. That was us. Atoms cannot be created nor destroyed under normal circumstances. It only changed back and forth to energy. And this energy became atoms that went to a star and were changed into other atoms that were spread through the universe, and then into other stars that were changed into other atoms that were spread and sprinkled into our solar system, forming Earth and forming us. All of us are together in this. And not only are we stardust, but we are made of energy. We once came from this energy pre-rapid expansion, Big Bang. And this is such a profound thought to me. It's beautiful. And to think the balance of the laws of physics, the balance of nature that had to make all this happen, it could only have happened because of that balance. And 14 billion years, think about that, 14 billion years. How many light years did these atoms that make us up travel going through hearts of stars? It's an insult. It is an insult to say that, sorry, I don't believe that we're 6,000 years old. We were created just like that. If there's an intelligent intelligence behind creating the laws of physics and triggering the Big Bang, that intelligence would be greatly insulted by that notion. I would imagine this intelligence thinking, I created the laws of physics. You've heard a lot about the Higgs boson. I've created the Higgs boson, and I set things up, this row of dominoes, and tipped it to go through these phases over 14 billion years, through this enormous universe of billions of light years across, to create you, thinking right there. And you're going to sit there and say, nope, sorry, I read this book written by this guy a couple thousand years ago, and he says, no, it didn't happen like that. That's human. That's your ego getting in the way of logic. What we've observed and discovered is truth. And just think about that thought. 14 billion years, over billions and billions of planets and stars and galaxies we have out there. It's amazing. It's really amazing.